Let's start by bowing in. Welcome, everyone, to the Path of Awakening Buddhist Center, the course on the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, a 3-volume set by Chogyam Trungpa. And these 3 volumes are actually a digest of 13 years of teachings he gave. Every year he would take usually 150 to 250 students away for a retreat for 3 months. In the first month, he would present the Hinayana teachings. These are the foundational teachings. In the second month, he would present the Mahayana, the greater vehicle teachings. And in the third month, he would represent the Vajrayana, the tantric vehicle teachings, the most advanced. We are just finishing the Mahayana, the second volume, and are about to make our way into the third, the teaching of the Vajrayana. I think we need to mute somebody. There we go.
Oh, it was me.
Okay. And we're going to do it gradually, or make our way into this volume. And tonight, by popular request, we're going to go through a quick summary with discussion of the first 2 stages of the Buddhist path, the so-called Hinayana and Mahayana. Hinayana literally means lesser vehicle. Yana means vehicle, like a cart. And it represents the very first stages of the practitioner's involvement with Buddhism. Trungpa Rinpoche didn't like the title lesser vehicle, the translation lesser vehicle. He preferred to call it the foundational vehicle because it's so important. It lays the foundation for our path. The second vehicle is the Mahayana. Maha means great, Yana means vehicle. And this carries us much further along. I'm going to just mention some of the key points of each one of these vehicles. And then I'm going to open it up for discussion. The Hinayana, lesser vehicle, is subdivided in a couple of different ways. One is that it's subdivided into 2 lesser vehicles, what's called the Shravakayana and the Pratyeka Yana. Again, always Yana, vehicle. The Shravakayana, Shravaka literally means hearer. It's the first introduction to the path. And the people on this stage of the path are listening to the teachings and beginning to practice Buddhist practices. Pratyeka Yana means, Pratyeka Buddha means self-enlightened Buddha. It's kind of a beginning stage of insight. And it's a stage that is very appropriate for people who tend to be loners. Loners, Pratyeka Buddhas are often loners, people who practice alone, whereas Shravakas are much more what Trungpa Rinpoche called magpies. They like to be in groups with other people and chirp away. So also another way of describing this yana, the Hinayana, is in the terms of the 5 paths, in which it represents the first 2 paths, the path of accumulation and the path of unification. And really, this is very similar. The path of unification means that we are beginning to, path of accumulation, the first path means that we're beginning to accumulate knowledge of philosophy and practice. And then the path of unification is that these accumulations are actually beginning to have an effect on us. We are beginning to change a bit as we become more in line with the Dharma that we have been studying. The motivation for the Hinayana path, this first stage, altogether is escape from suffering and unhappiness. This is what brings us to the path. It's really the first of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught, that there is suffering, and we would like to find a way to mitigate or even escape from it. And this is what brings us to the path altogether, and it's the motivation for this first stage of the path, escape from suffering. Especially it's the motivation for the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, though. The person at this stage of the path, the goal that they are going to achieve when they accomplish this Hinayana path altogether is what's called the 1.5-fold egolessness. And what that means is that they discover the truth of egolessness, that I is just a name for a concatenation of events that we experience, and we gloss it with the word I. It has no true existence. It's a story that we tell ourselves about life. And we tell this story, and the hero or the heroine of this story is I. And I is always on a search, on a quest for happiness, security, and escape from suffering. That search, that trajectory, is fraught with anxiety, because will we make it or will we not? And these little, we have little sort of short moments of pursuing happiness and escaping suffering. So for instance, you go out for dinner and you're hoping it'll be a good meal. And will it be a good meal? And then you sit there and you judge it, and maybe you pronounce it a good meal, maybe you pronounce it somewhat lacking, who knows what. But all of that is lit with unhappiness, with anxiety, with tension, because we're on a trajectory towards an imagined goal for me, for I. Meanwhile, this life is arising and passing away in the present moment all around us. And we only see it sort of dimly or in a shrouded way through the veil of our projects, of our goal orientation. And all of that colors the way in which we see the world and our progress through it. We see everything in terms of good and bad, hope and fear. And these judgments of good and bad and the hope and the fear cloud our true perception of the world as it arises now, right now, in this present moment. And so we seek to find the 1.5-fold egolessness. The 1-fold egolessness is the discovery that comes to us through the practice of meditation and through study and contemplation. It is the discovery that I is just a myth, a fiction, or as Trungpa Rinpoche once bellowed at me, a lie. It is not true. It doesn't actually exist. The 1.5-fold egolessness is that we begin to discover as well that not only does I not exist, but neither does other. Because as soon as we are believing in I, we are believing in an other. I and other are always in relationship. And these stories that we tell about I and other are lit by this relationship. And this relationship takes 3 forms. These are called the 3 poisons. If we see the other as something desirable to me, something that's going to make me happy, augment my existence, give me security and peace and whatever, all positive things, then we want to draw that other to us. This is the first poison. It's called passion, desire. The second poison is that if we see this other, whatever it may be, as being antithetical to us, dangerous, aggressive, an enemy to our well-being, then we want to push it away. And this is called aggression or hatred, the second poison. And then if we regard the other as being indifferent, neutral, as having no real consequence for us one way or the other, this is the third poison. We regard that other as being neutral. And the poison is ignoring or indifference or stupidity. These are the three ways that I and other interact. And so the second egolessness, this half-fold, 1.5-fold egolessness, is the beginning discovery that the other has no real existence either. It's just a constant presentation. We don't get all the way there at the Hinayana stage of the path. We don't get to the twofold egolessness. That comes later. Also, this stage of the path, we discover the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha, and really the most underlying teaching of the whole Buddhist path. And they are simply that the first truth is the truth of suffering, that there is suffering, that we all experience, unhappiness, pain. The second truth is that there is an origin to this suffering. And what that is partly what I've just been describing in terms of belief in ego and other, I and other. The third truth is that there can be a cessation of suffering, an escape, an out. And the fourth truth is that there is a path leading to the cessation of suffering, and that we, by entering the Buddhist path, are on that path to the cessation of suffering. This is what characterizes this first stage, the Hinayana stage of the path. It is the pursuit of the cessation of suffering. Likewise, another fundamental teaching at this stage of the path, which permeates the whole path, are the three marks of existence. These are the three primary characteristics of being. The first is suffering. Buddhism just really focuses on that. The second is impermanence, that everything is impermanent. And by impermanent, we don't just mean that cars rust, bodies go, hair goes gray and bodies deteriorate. This is sort of impermanence over time, long stretches of time. There's not a cell in your body now that was there when you were 6 years old. They've all changed, died, and been replaced. There's that kind of impermanence. The wind blows, the weather changes, but there's more to it than that. There's the fact that in this moment, right now, nothing is enduring. This hand moves, the gesture changes, the sounds come out of this mouth, continually changing. The tastes in your mouth change all the time, the smells, the bodily sensations. Now that you touch your chest, feel your bottom on the cushion. These are the 5 sense perceptions. Sights are constantly changing. Look at this image on the screen. It doesn't stay the same even for an instant. Sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mind, mental events, are constantly in flux. So that's the second mark of existence. There's a biography of Suzuki Roshi, the great master of the Zen Center in San Francisco. And in the preface to it, I forget the author's name. Well, senior moment. He's writing the preface. Oh well, Val knows it. And
David Chadwick.
Thank you, David Chadwick. And he describes a conversation with Suzuki Roshi, and he asks Roshi if he could sum up the very essence of Buddhism in just a word or two. And he says in the preface that he didn't think that Roshi would do it. Roshi, without pausing, responds, impermanence, the very essence of Buddhism, that everything is a constantly changing display in this present moment. And the third mark of existence is egolessness, which we have been talking about. The fact that I and other don't have any true existence. They're just ideas, concepts, which lead us into error and suffering because we spend inordinate energy and effort in maintaining the well-being of what we think is I. And in doing so, we miss so much of life. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, which I'm not really going to go into, but Trungpa Rinpoche does, and I think we covered this in the first volume, but he gives us a very special version, his version of the 4 foundations, and I'm not sure where it comes from. And they're body, the mindfulness of body, mindfulness of life, mindfulness of effort, and mindfulness of mind, that you actually are aware, awake to all these things. So we have the fundamental split between suffering, confusion, which is always based on belief in an I, and everything that attends to that belief, the desire to take care of I and keep it alive and well and happy. And this is called samsara, confusion, because we are confused. We don't really understand our lives. And we're constantly running into difficult situations. And it's opposite, which is what we strive for on the path of Buddhism, which is Bodhi. Bodhi means awake or awakening. And this path is to awaken to true reality. Sorry. So the path of awakening, awakening to reality, awakening to sanity, true sanity, which is so much different than the mentality of the samsaric beings. Another key doctrine of this path, this stage of the path, is the 5 Skandas. The 5 Skandas are the story of how ego comes into being. The first Skanda is that almost magically, in the middle of open space, a figure emerges from the ground. Actually, a figure emerges and there's suddenly a figure and a ground. There wasn't before. There was just this open space of flashing lights and colors and sounds and smells and bodily sensations and all of that. But a figure emerges as being important. And that figure implies a perceiver of the figure here. This is the birth of ignorance. It's called the first skanda. And the second skanda is that having developed this dichotomy, an object out there and a perceiver here, the perceiver wants to reach out and make a relationship with that in order to preserve this false statement, which is just a statement that's being made over and over again. And so what the perceiver does is it reaches out and it wants to feel the quality of that other, that figure that has emerged from the ground, and see, is it for me, against me, or indifferent? 3 poisons. The 3 poisons, by the way, if you ever see the Wheel of Life, which is a big wheel that's being held by Yama, the Lord of Death, and in the middle of the Wheel of Life are a rooster, a pig, and a snake. These are the symbols of the 3 poisons. The rooster is desire, the pig is indifference or sloth, and the snake is hatred, aggression. So the 5 skandhas, I'm not going to go into this now. We've done this before in the chapter, and we can always go over it again. It's a beautiful teaching, and it describes how this back and forth elaborates and complicates until finally you get the full-blown development of ego, this belief in an I, and it's very neurotic, and it lives in one or more of the 6 realms. This is another teaching that we're going to be talking about. The 6 realms are the 6 realms of desire. There are actually 3 worlds And one of these worlds is the world of desire. And that is divided into 6 realms. The other 2 are the world of pure form and the world of formless gods. And these are mental states, creations that have to do with the development of the ability to go into trance and experience extremely pleasurable, it's like getting high on drugs, states. These are the 2 upper worlds, the world of form and the formless world. But the world of desire, which is the bottom of these 3 worlds, is divided into 6, which are more familiar to everybody. This is the God realm, the realm of the jealous gods, going down the human realm, the realm of animals, the realm of the hungry ghosts, and the hell realm. And these are mental states that we wind up in at the end of, or when we fully developed the 5 skandhas. The 5 skandhas end with the 5th skandha, consciousness, which is the world of the realms and the worlds. If you're a meditator and you're going to practice the concentrations and get into the God realms, which is very dangerous and not recommended, but people do it. So we have the 5 skandhas, we have the 6 realms, we have in this body of teaching the 12 nidanas. The 12 nidanas, which I'm not going to go through here, are a description of how karma works. That is, that once we believe in an I, we take steps to solidify that I. And those steps are described as in the wheel of life, and you can see them in the wheel of life as 12 stages, beginning with ignorance and ending with death. And they go around and around and around and around, both in terms of a life, a whole lifetime, but in terms of even a moment. Now, we can go through the whole thing. We can create a mental construct, and then it dies, and we go on to the next. And these take place in 12 stages called the 12 nidanas. It's a very rich teaching, a beautiful teaching. The practices of this stage of the path are primarily shamatha and vipassana meditation. You might think that they're beginning practices, but they are not. The principles of shamatha and vipassana will go all the way through to the very highest levels of the path. Because shamatha is the ability to focus your mind on an object or objects. It's focus, rather than being completely lost in dream. We can focus on something that is occurring now, in the present moment. It could be anything. It could be a mantra. It could be a statue in front of you. It could just be this room, that you are present here uninterruptedly for some period of time. It might be a very short time. It might be a long, extended time. That is the principle of shamatha. The ability to remain in consciousness uninterruptedly for however long. And then the principle of vipassana is that coming into consciousness and remaining there for however long, we are conscious of a range of things. So for instance, you come into this room and you're conscious, you're aware, vipassana, of the air, the light, the window, the image on your computer screen. You have a broad panoramic awareness of anything and everything that is arising in this space. So these 2 principles of, you might say, concentrated awareness, not being lost in dreams, and then being concentrated and having come back from awareness, then to be aware of anything and everything as it arises now. These are the 2 principles of shamatha, which is usually translated as mindfulness. That means that you're not lost in dream, you come back. And vipassana, which is usually translated as awareness, sometimes as panoramic awareness, means that once having come back, we are aware of all of the 6 objects of awareness: sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mental events as they arise and pass away. These principles of shamatha and vipassana will continue throughout to the very end of the path. We tend to think of them as being sort of beginning practices. It goes all the way to the end. The teacher, finally, at this stage of the path, is a preceptor, someone who knows the doctrine and the practices and can teach it to you, like a teacher in school. And they're very pure. They are, this person, they are not neurotic. But their insight, or the way they communicate their insight, has a limitation. They are not going deeply into your neurotic personality. Rather, they're leading you, precepting you into the practices and ideas of Buddhism. And the accomplishment that you achieve here is to achieve a state of relative absence of suffering, not complete by any means, but a great calming down of the suffering, and a development of insight into the nature of reality, which we've been discussing in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the three marks, samsara and nirvana, and so forth. The Mahayana stage of the path, the second stage, having developed one's meditation, one's shamatha and vipassana, having cleaned up your mind, you might say, so that you begin to actually see what's happening in this present moment and to be at peace with it, relatively speaking. Not to be lost in dreams of self-aggrandizement and self-protection, but to be able to become present and aware. This leads one ultimately into the first stage of the Mahayana path. The Mahayana path is divided into 10 stages called bhumis. Bhumi means stage, literally means earth. And the very first one is the entrance into the Mahayana path, and it's the discovery of the twofold egolessness, which is called in the Mahayana path the teaching of shunyata. Shunyata means, shunya means empty or void, and ta is a nominative. It turns it into a noun. So it becomes shunyata means emptiness, voidness. What is it empty of? It's empty of belief in I and other. And becoming empty of that belief, one enters into a world of freedom, freedom from being constantly enslaved to self-preservation and self-aggrandizement. One opens into a new world of clarity because one isn't seeing the world in the same way that one was before, through these veils of hope and fear about me, through these veils of good and bad, which are always about me, what's good for me and bad for me. Instead, one is beginning to see the world as it truly is, as it arises in this present moment. This first bhumi is called great joy, and it's irreversible. It may come only in flashes, but once it comes, the person can't turn back fundamentally and get lost in confusion fundamentally ever again, because they've seen it. They have seen the truth. And while it may be dim or it may be in flashes, nonetheless, it's there. This first bhumi is called Pramudita. That's the name for it. Great joy. And this is really what enables you to become the practitioner at this stage of the path. Remember, at the first, in the Hinayana, you were either a Shravaka, a hearer of teachings, or a Pratyeka Buddha, a person who is sort of a very lonely practitioner, but who is discovering egolessness. Now, you become a Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva, Bodhi means awake, Sattva means being, and you're an awakened being. You're awakened to shunyata. We've got somebody who needs to mute. Just if you'd check yourself. So you're an awakened being. And what also happens at this stage of the path is tremendous joy. Joy because you've gotten away from suffering. Now, the very fact that you're happy to have gotten away from suffering is itself a very subtle form of suffering, because you're comparing this freedom that you've got now with what you remember before of being suffering. And that suffering itself, that suffering of the discovery of reality and the joy, the celebration of that, diminishes through the 10 stages of the Bodhisattva path. But it's a form of subtle, very subtle form of egotism itself, because we're still very concerned with our well-being. Slightly, increasingly less. But that's the logic of it. It's ego just finds ways to stick around subtler and subtler. And its most subtle form is in the appreciation of egolessness itself. The very voice that says, oh, isn't egolessness wonderful, is itself a subtle form of ego, of self-aggrandizement. Excuse me. And this falls away throughout the Bodhisattva path. And this is why the Bodhisattva is not fully enlightened. But what also happens at this stage of the path is that, having seen the openness of shunyata, of I and other being myths, non-existent, lies, if you want, the great joy that arises engenders in the Bodhisattva tremendous compassion for people who haven't seen it, who are still lost in believing in I and other. And so what goes along with shunyata is the birth of true compassion. Karuna in Sanskrit, Nyingje in Tibetan. And it goes hand in hand. These are two sides of the same coin, shunyata and compassion. Because shunyata frees the bodhisattva and enables that person to see other people who haven't made that discovery yet as suffering under the delusion that they exist and need to preserve their existence, and it engenders tremendous compassion. And so the bodhisattva wants to help the other sentient beings, and that's the hallmark of being a bodhisattva. The main motivation of the bodhisattva is to practice the Dharma and to deepen their understanding, but at the same time to be of service, to be of help to all these suffering sentient beings. There's nothing else to do in this life at that stage of the path. Now, in terms of the 5 paths, remember the first path was the path of accumulation. You're collecting teachings and practices. The second path was the path of unification, meaning that it's actually beginning to work on you now. And the third path is the one that is connected with the first bhumi. It's the path of vision. Suddenly you can break through ego and see the truth, which is shunyata, and experience true compassion and joy. Compassion and joy are really very, very, very much almost the same thing. The joy that you experience in freedom becomes compassion for the people around you. So, in terms of the paths, the entrance into the first bhumi, discovering emptiness, shunyata, the absence of I and other, that they were just stories, myths, that is called the path of vision. And the rest of the bodhisattva path is coming back to that vision, deepening it, living in it. And that is called, the rest of the bhumis are all part of the path of meditation. Meditation now doesn't mean focusing your mind one-pointedly on your breath. Meditation means coming back to shunyata, coming back to reality. If you find yourself lapsing into dream, you come back to what is real, which is this. So the motivation on this path is to benefit all sentient beings. And it comes about very naturally, since the Bodhisattva is living in joy and openness and freedom, and they see other people who are not, who are living in sorrow and enslavement to the idea of self-preservation, they want to help them. It's a very natural motivation because they're no longer concerned about me. Me is gone, more or less. It's gotten very, very subtle anyhow, and it gets subtler and subtler. And so the Bodhisattva has all the time and energy to develop compassion and helpfulness for other sentient beings. The goal of this stage of the path, the Mahayana, is full enlightenment. The Bodhisattva hasn't quite gotten there yet because they're clinging to egolessness a little bit. And that is wearing out as the Bodhisattva progresses through each stage of the path. And these stages, by the way, these bhumis, are irreversible. Isn't that good news? That's what they say. So the doctrines that inform this stage of the path are shunyata, emptiness of I and other, prajna. Prajna is the intelligence that sees everything as being empty of I and other. And it sees with tremendous clarity because there's no longer any veils of hope and fear, or at least they've gotten very, very thin. They are habits which are falling away. Veils of good and bad, which is always about me, good and bad for me. Those are falling away. And so prajna is this clear seeing that is enabled by shunyata. It's called transcendent knowledge. And it is transcendent because it's seeing the absence of I and other. Maitri, loving kindness, this is so important. It means that now we're not attacking ourselves. A confused being, a samsaric being, is constantly saying, I'm not good enough. I'm not happy enough. I'm not well off enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not healthy enough. Whatever it may be. Wishing things were otherwise. Maitri is beginning to love oneself. The greatest enemy we've got is self-hatred, self-attack. And it's a waste of time. It's a myth. It's a wrong idea. And Maitri is loving kindness that overcomes that. And the flip side of Maitri is compassion. Compassion for others. Maitri, you might say, is compassion for yourself. Loving kindness, the word is Maitri. But compassion, karuna, for others is not a feeling sorry for at all. It's a resonance. It's an ability to resonate with other people and to understand them and help them. Because why? Because this world is a beautiful place. That's the vision of the Mahayana. And the practitioner wants to communicate that. And so they increasingly manifest and demonstrate awakened mind. This is another major principle of the Mahayana. Awakened mind, that you come back into this open space which is absent I and other, absent all of the schemes and problems that inform the relationship between I and other. All of that is dissolving. And this is called awakened mind, Bodhichitta in Sanskrit, Changchup Sempa in Tibetan. Another key principle is Tathagata Garbha, which means Buddha nature. Tathagata is the word, sometimes it's called Sugata. Gata means gone to. Tata is as it is. So the Tathagata is one who has gone to as it is, gone to truth, gone to reality. Sometimes they're called the Sugata Garbha. Sugata is bliss. because they've gone to this great joy of experiencing reality. Gata Sugata. And Garbha means essence, womb. We all have Tathagata Garbha in us. We are essentially and fundamentally Buddhas. And that is what is meant by Buddha nature. And what we are doing is uncovering, revealing our Buddha nature, our awakened state of mind. Sometimes this is likened to a beggar living in a hovel, not knowing that beneath the floor is buried a treasure. This is a samsaric being, not knowing that inside them is revealed or is living Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature. Finally, the doctrine of the two truths, absolute and relative. This is very important in the Mahayana because absolute truth is, you might say, shunyata. The fact that there is no I and other. Things don't have any true being, solid, ongoing being. Rather, everything is a constantly changing presentation. Like these words, like these gestures, like this, the feelings of your body now that I mention it, the thoughts that go on in your mind. Everything is constantly changing. So the two truths, the absolute truth is that nothing has any ongoing existence. Nothing has an ongoing existence. Not only that, nothing is unitary. It's not one thing, like it exists as one thing. And independently, everything is a constant and ever-changing manifestation and part of this display that we are living in all the time. You can't even find the me. It's just a constant changing display. And this is the absolute truth. And the relative truth, there are two stages to the relative truth. The relative truth is that while nothing has any true being, true existence, ongoing, solitary, unitary, independently, nonetheless, there's the pink of this cheek, there's the sound of this voice, there's the feeling of your bottom on the chair, there's the taste in your mouth as you eat your dinner. There are all these things that appear and disappear in the moment. That's the relative truth. It's marvelous. There's this constant display of qualities, of the 6 fundamental qualities. 6 fundamental qualities. So that's the relative truth. And that's, I've quoted this slogan, things don't exist. They don't have any true being. They're just this display. Can't find it. And yet they arise. This word comes out, the gesture, the pink of this flesh, the black of this sweater. They arise, and yet they don't exist. What we're living in is almost like a dream, a constantly changing presentation, a gorgeous display. So these are the two truths. Now, there is a false and a true relative truth. I've just described the true relative truth. The false relative truth says, I don't have enough money. What's for dinner? I love you, but I don't love you. I mean, there's a constant belief in the true existence of things. That's the false relative truth. And we're going to be dealing with this a lot in the Vajrayana, because the Vajrayana is really, really about relative truth. Talked about the Bodhisattva. There's another principle. We've got prajna, which is this clear seeing, sees transcendentally, sees that I and other doesn't exist, sees things as they are. That's a big word, ta, as it is. Sees them naked, stripped of judgments of I and other, judgments of good and bad. And compassion, meaning that there is enormous joy and sympathy that arises naturally. It's not a feeling sorry for. It's really like love. And then the third principle that develops on the Bodhisattva path, and it's actually the hardest of these three principles to develop. It comes in at the seventh bhumi, is skillful means, which means that now that you see the world as it is, now that you have this emotional resonance with the world, this great sympathy and love, you want to act skillfully to help the world out of confusion, out of samsara, out of suffering. And that skillfulness is called skillfulness, upaya in Sanskrit, tap in Tibetan. Skillful means, it's usually translated as. And this is a development of the Bodhisattva at the seventh bhumi. It also becomes fully developed in Buddhahood. So we go through these bhumis, and I'm not going to go through them. We've done it before. Got a list of them here. But the first 6 bhumis, each bhumi has a paramita, a transcendent virtue, which is sort of the way they're there all of them. All 10 paramitas in the 10 bhumis are there from the beginning. But each bhumi emphasizes and sort of brings one to the fore. And the first 6 bhumis manifest what are popularly called the 6 paramitas, because they're the most considered, thought about. The 5th is the paramita of transcendent meditation, that your mind is really resting in reality. And the 6th is prajna paramita. We should chant the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is the prajna paramita teaching that the Buddha gave to his Hinayana and Mahayana disciples, and shocked some of them, the Hinayana ones. The practices of the Mahayana path, same thing. The practices of Samadhi, meditation. Excuse me, there are 3 main practices. Shila, which is discipline. This means to live your life in a way that is true to the reality. Samadhi, meditation, means to have a mind that is tuned to it. And prajna, intelligence, we've discussed, sees shunyata, understands doctrine, sees things as they are. The main practices are shamatha and vipassana again, but going deeper now, because we go into shunyata meditation, seeing the world as it truly is, stripped of these false beliefs in I and other, as it is. Maitri, compassion, loving kindness and compassion are practices. The bodhisattva activity being of benefit to sentient beings. And we're inspired to do that, and we do that also as a practice. Skillful means, lojong is a practice of the Mahayana, and we've studied lojong together, these slogans, and they arise, if you study them enough, they arise in different circumstances and sort of wake you up. And finally, the teacher at this stage of the path is called the Kalyana Mitra, which means in Sanskrit, spiritual friend. And the teacher is a person who, to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the individual, has seen the truth of shunyata and has experienced it, him or herself, and is inspired to help other people and can communicate it according to their capacity, and does so out of friendship. The hallmark of the relationship between the Kalyana Mitra and the student is openness, communication, sharing mind, trust. Trungpa Rinpoche once said, when you're looking for a teacher, what you look for is someone with whom you can communicate openly, with trust, with friendship. Doesn't mean that the relationship won't be painful from time to time. Could be. Depends on you and the teacher. But that is the sine qua non. The sine qua non. I mean, the thing you can't do without is that openness of communication with the Kalyana Mitra. So it's different. At the Mahayana level, the teacher is kind of more austere, up on a throne, a preceptor, teaching you doctrine and practices, and demonstrating non-aggression. At the Mahayana level, the teacher becomes a deep friend, communicating the depth of the teachings. I'm thinking of Trungpa Rinpoche was all of these, and he was also a Vajrayana master. But I had a close friend who was definitely a Kalyana Mitra. He was a Japanese sensei. His name was Kobun Chino sensei. When I knew him, eventually he became a Roshi. And I remember one time we were talking, and I said to Kobun, I feel like, maybe I should be doing more. There are people like Mother Teresa who really devote themselves, to helping other people in such a profound way. And look at me, we just finished skiing. I took him skiing. He was a kamikaze skier, Kobun was. He's passed now. He's dead. Died young. And anyhow, so I said that to him. Maybe I should be more like Mother Teresa. And he looked at me across the table. We were sitting at a table. And he said, a bodhisattva is a person who finishes the conversation with the person sitting across the table from them. It's that simple. We're in constant communication as bodhisattvas with the people who are sitting across the table from us. Communicating what? Communicating the depth of our spiritual understanding, actually embodying it, whatever it may be, in truth, without deception, without dissimulation, without pretense. So we're getting ready to enter the Vajrayana stage of the path, which is really taking all this even further. Interesting that you just don't ever let go of the principles of shamatha and vipassana. They go all the way through. The practices may change a little bit, but the way in which we practice them embodies concentration, coming back, mindfulness, coming back from dream into awareness, and then awareness of whatever it is that we have to do. I'm going to let you know what the assignment is for next week, tomorrow, I think. I'm debating about whether or not to launch into the third volume next week, or to take a brief pause, maybe for a week or two or three, and discuss the main philosophies of the Mahayana, which are Madhyamaka and Yogacara. Madhyamaka is sometimes called the middle way philosophy. It's the philosophy of Shunyata. Yogacara is sometimes called Chittamatra in Sanskrit. It means it's the philosophy of mind only, it's called. And I think these two philosophies so dominated the Mahayana stage of the path and as it developed in India, and then had a tremendous influence on the Vajrayana. And there's a wonderful book called Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Kenpo Sultrum Gyatso. When Rinpoche was approaching his death, he told us that he didn't trust a lot of Tibetan teachers, that they didn't understand Americans. One of the few people he really trusted was Kenpo Sultrum Gyatso, the author of that book. And Kenpo has taught a lot in our community. At this point, he's pretty much retired from teaching and living in Nepal. I think he must be about 87, 88 years old. But this book, Progressive Stages, is quite a terrific book, and it gives a concise, simple, and clear understanding of these two main schools of the Mahayana, Madhyamaka and Yogacara, the middle way and mind only. Madhyamaka is all about shunyata, and Yogacara is all about mind. So even if we don't do it, I'm going to go over these books. I haven't looked at them in a lot of years and see if I think that they're appropriate. If they are, I'll be sending it out in an email tomorrow. And even if they're not, you might consider reading it. It's a terrific book and very simple and very, very, very clear. So we could have a discussion.
Who is the author again, please?
I'm gonna send it out in an email. Well, no, I should put it in chat. Hold on a second. I'll put it in chat to everyone.
Okay.
It is.
And Laura Reed just put a link in.
Oh, look at that. But if we do it, you may not be able to get the book in time, and you can download the PDF for free
Oh,
at, what's it called?
PDF drive.
Live.
If you put your email in chat, I'll send it out. I'll send out the PDF.
Actually, I will send out the link tomorrow because there are different editions of this, different versions of it, and I'd like everybody to use the same edition. So I'll send out the link to the PDF of it and tomorrow in an email. Okay? Yeah. Okay. And now you've got a lot in chat there. Oh, good, Roland. We need your email.
oh,
Okay.
well,
If I'm in this meeting, am I on your email list automatically?
No, you have to give us your email.
Okay, how do I do that?
You can put it in chat.
I'll do that now.
Okay. Okay. And Barry, can we get back to a different screen?
I took the spotlight off you. Now it's just
Well,
choosing
we can-
gallery view instead.
Okay. So comments, questions? Pretty amazing body of material we've been through, isn't it? God.
it is.
I want to thank you. I've been looking for this stuff on emptiness for a while, and I right now I got the short version of the Heart Sutra going on. It's I hope you don't hear it because I try to lower it as much as I can.
No, we don't hear it.
And you know, the only thing that I got that I could understand, you say it's the emptiness of I and other. And when I think about the other shore, the only thing I can think of is oneness. And if there's oneness, there is no I and other. But that's my limited understanding. I started doing a lot of reading when I got to AA in '87, and I end up here.
You and a lot of people.
And I was into Hinduism for a while. I read and read and read. I read a lot of books, a lot of them.
Ron,
And
Ron,
I
I think,
oh there was thousands of books.
okay, we'll talk more.
Okay.
We'll give people a chance to ask questions, and you're new, and we'll work on it. Great. Welcome.
Are you speaking to Roland or me?
Well, I was speaking to Roland. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay.
Here, I'm switching it to gallery view so we can see everybody.
Well, since you're such an authority and everything, I've been, my whole life doing this stuff, but recently I got this particular book, and I just wondered if you're familiar with it and you might know anything about it, because it's a big book for me to take on, but it's called The Mind Illuminated by John Yates, also known as Kuladasa.
Nope. Don't know anything about it.
Okay. It's
Sorry.
all right.
Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you, John. That was a that was a great review. It was really
Well, it was requested. And
it's a review, but it sounds new all the time too. So
doesn't it just?
thank you. Yeah. So thank you.
Me too.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's always being newer and newer. Kurt.
All right. Yeah, John, that was just so beautiful to review that, and it just, it took me back to a place where in the Hinayana teachings, and this was helpful for me back then, and it came up again for me tonight. A way for this Western mind to grasp this. Back when we were doing the Hinayana teachings, I kept coming back to trying to understand it through the idea of quantum physics and whatnot, and breaking it down into our Western science of we're just atoms and molecules, and we're spinning around, and there's more hollowness in the universe and in ourselves than in solidity. And your talk tonight brought me back to that perception of understanding, and it was still very helpful for me to this Western mind to break it down into a scientific concept. And I just wanted to say that, and really a big thank you for the review. Very profound to have all those teachings wrapped up in that hour talk.
I wasn't sure going into this how it was going to play out. Christy, did you have something?
I was just going to say we never are sure how it all plays out, are we?
No. Yeah, absolutely not.
One thing we can be sure of, I guess. That's
Yeah.
could be good, could be bad.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I just think it's funny that the Profound Treasury doesn't really deal with Madhyamaka and Yogacara, and yet they're so important. These two schools of philosophy that developed in India and then went to Tibet.
I think he did go into it briefly.
I went through a couple of Madhyamaka arguments, but there's so much more. And Kenpo will illuminate that. Kenpo Sultrum God. So many people in our Sangha have studied with him.
I'd love to hear more about it.
We will.
Good. Let's do it.
Okay.
John?
Yes.
Yep. I've studied most of my life Advaita Vedanta. I guess today it's called Neo-Advaita Vedanta. But I've seen on a number of occasions, it's been cross-referenced, I believe, to what you call, I can't pronounce it right now,
Madhyamaka.
Yeah. Are you familiar enough with Neo-Vedanta to see you know, how much they overlap? Is it basically a non-dual philosophy?
Advaita Vedanta is a non-dual philosophy, and I studied it before I got into Buddhism, but I'm not an expert on it by any means. I studied teachings.
I'm asking about the other one, the Buddhist one that you're referencing now. Is that non-dual?
Oh, Buddhism altogether is non-dual. Yeah, not completely. Yeah. Well, friends, we don't seem to be getting a lot of discussion.
Bodro.
Oh, there we go. Bodro.
Thank you, John, for the amazing presentation. What I can take from many of the things that you said is that we will spend the rest of our lives going through the Hinayana and the Mahayana principles. But I have heard and read many times about the dangers of going into the Vajrayana too soon. And I was wondering, how do we know when we're ready to go into the Vajrayana, if at all, if there are any signs?
Because Trungpa Rinpoche will take you in a way that is safe, beyond corruption. And it's the way he trained all of his students. And so, no, you don't need to worry about that at all, although I understand where it comes from. There are many stories about abuse of the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, and in a number of different ways. None of that applies here. This will be a very pure and correct introduction to the Vajrayana. And it's very powerful, the Vajrayana, which is wonderful. Has the ability to really bring us deeper into the path. So you don't need to be worried about it.
I trust you fully. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for bringing it up.
Tully has his hand raised.
John, thank you for a masterful summary, and thank you also for the story of your encounter with the Roshi. I love that the Bodhisattva finishes the conversation of the person he's sitting across from. It's fantastic. So thanks for sharing that, as well as I said, a masterful summary. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Kobun became a Roshi. He was a kind of a confrere, a colleague of Suzuki Roshi, but he was only a sensei. Roshi and Suzuki Roshi was a Roshi. But eventually, after Roshi's death, Kobun became a Roshi. And he married and had a child, young child, and he and his wife and child were in Switzerland. And they were at the edge of a lake. And his child wandered into the lake and drowned. And Kobun went in after the child and drowned with him. And I know one of his close students who said that he felt that Kobun did it deliberately so that he could help his child cross into death, but who knows? But it was a great loss. Kobun was just a wonderful person. Yeah, he was. And a great teacher and practitioner. Helped a lot of people. Kobun Chino Sensei, Kobun Chino Roshi. Well, perhaps we should end here. We're a little early. Wow. Amazing. So I'll put the chants up. And Sarah, you can lead us in the chants. Here we go. And I want to reiterate my invitation to discuss your meditation practice with you. Just contact me if you have that desire.
We will close the evening with a prayer for peace, and then by dedicating the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thank you, John. There.
Everybody.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
so
Hey,
much.
John, that was wonderful.
Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
It was amazing.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Practice.
Good to see you, Barry.
Mhm.
Wow, Barry.
That was great, John. So empowering.
Thank you.
Empowering?
Really,
Really?
empowering. Yeah,
That's
because I thought at least I understand much more than I thought I did. It was great. Thank you.
That's great.
That's good. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
You're bringing it alive, John. Thank
Dude,
you.
how clear
Great.
you are. Thanks.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Come back
Hi,
soon.
Roland.
Y'all.
Good to meet you, Roland. Hi, George. You're muted, George. George, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you for that summary. It's brilliant and moving. I wanted to say I emailed you last week about finding a time to talk, so I can send you another email.
Please do. I've lost it.
Okay,
But I'd love to do that.
great. I'll do it. I'll send
Okay.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, Peter. There we go.
Ellen's in the waiting room.
Well, I got to turn off the recording here.